Welcome to the Tribe of Testimonies. Here you will find conversations with faithful Native American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sharing their stories and their love of the Savior. My name's Andrea Hales. I'm Navajo, and I'm glad that you've decided to come and join us today. Today my guest is Tom Pittman. I found Tom by, there was a post on Native American First Nations Latter-day Saint community on Facebook, and somebody had asked, what's your tribal affiliation? And there were a bunch of people that posted things, and his was a tribal affiliation that I hadn't had before, so I asked him if he'd be willing, and oh man, I'm so glad that I had the time with Tom. In fact, I had 2 times with Tom because halfway through the first time, my equipment stopped working. Thankfully, it recorded that first half. So we finished it up the next morning as well. So if it sounds different, it's because I had to splice 2 different days. But here's Tom. I hope you really enjoy him. His testimony is strong, and I'm grateful for him. This morning, I am on the phone with Brother Tom Pittman. We've never met in person, and I'm excited for this interview. Would you please introduce yourself in your tribal way as much as possible? If it's in your language, that's great. If not, that's fine. Not everybody speaks their language, and some languages are dead, so...
Yes, well, my mother was a fluent Tlingit speaker, but she said that her elders asked her generation not to teach their children the Tlingit language. At the time, they thought it would help us better adapt to mainstream culture. So although there are over 24,000 people enrolled in my tribe, the Tlingit tribe, only 1 to 2% of us can actually speak the language. I wish I were one of them, but I only know words and phrases. So my introduction will be in English. My name is Tom Lawrence Pittman VII. My dad is Tom VI, and my son is Tom VIII. I guess our family doesn't have a lot of imagination when it comes to boys' names.
That's amazing, though. Holy cow.
Yes. We, of course, look forward to the grandchild, Tom IX. But I'm a member of the Tlingit tribe of Southeast Alaska. I'm of the Raven Moiety and the Dakdetan or Sea Pigeon clan. My Tlingit name is Kahuk. I grew up in a small fishing village in Southeast Alaska, about 8.5 hours by boat from the nearest town. I checked the census records this week just because I was curious, and I see that the population when I grew up of my town was 3,237 people. So you don't want to offend people because you're going to be bumping into them again later. When I was growing up,
that town's bigger than the town that I grew up in. My town was about 2,000 people, so I get that. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. When I was growing up, we had a total of 17 miles of paved streets on our island. I Googled it yesterday, and I see that that number has shot up to 24 miles of paved streets now, so they're living the life. My first experience with a traffic light was when I was 18 years old and went to Seattle. It was so exciting to see 2 lanes of streets going the same direction and traffic lights. So I told the person I was with that I felt like I was in a movie. It was such a great experience. My mother raised us in the ways of our people. I harvested herring eggs, I fished, hunted, gathered shellfish and berries, wore regalia, danced traditional dances, sang native songs, and ate Tlingit foods. And although I didn't grow up with my dad, he is English and Scottish. So like a Toyota Prius, I'm a hybrid, except Priuses are quieter when they're all gassed up. Speaking of English, my wife is British. She was born and raised in the south of England. Nikki and I have 7 children and 9 grandchildren. And I don't mean to brag, but given that the Pittman home consists of British immigrants and Native Americans, we probably have one of the more authentic Thanksgiving celebrations in our area. When our kids reach college age, we moved from Alaska to Orem for their college years. At the moment, all 7 of our kids have bachelor's degrees and 2 have master's degrees and 3 are in grad school. So I'm really glad we did. I think it was a very positive thing for the family. I'm a convert to the church. I'll talk about that more later, but I served a Spanish-speaking mission in Southern California, and I absolutely loved it. Because of my dark skin and dark hair and dark eyes, almost everyone assumed I was Hispanic, and that was fine by me. I loved learning their language and their cultures, and it helped me identify closer with my own. When I got home from my mission, I took the Myers-Briggs personality test. I failed, and that's how I knew I had an aptitude for technology. So being a person with no personality, I studied information management at BYU and computer information systems at the University of Alaska. With my technology background, I worked for organizations like IBM in the city of Anchorage, but I also spent much of my career working for Native organizations like the Native Hospital in Anchorage, Alaska, for our tribal government offices in Juneau, and for Native-owned corporations. And I loved these jobs, being around our own Indigenous people, and I loved how our culture became part of our work environment in these organizations. And I guess that's my introduction.
I don't. You couldn't have failed the Myers-Briggs personality test. You are already cracking me up.
Sometimes I get that way when I'm nervous, I guess.
Tom, would you share something that you love about your heritage, whether that's a celebration, a story, a way of life, a ceremony, anything that you love about your heritage, especially if it relates to the gospel of Jesus Christ?
That would be my pleasure. Thanks to the Marvel movies, most Americans are aware of the Norse god of mischief, Loki. But I don't think most people know that Tlingits have a god of mischief as well. He is the raven, he's the trickster. But the thing is about Raven is he's also our creator. So in other words, Tlingits believe that our creator is also a trickster and that he deliberately puts us through trials to test us and teach us. Is that a gospel or a parallel to the gospel of Jesus Christ? I don't know, but there is a story in the Old Testament about this guy named Job. It says Job was perfect and upright and feared God and eschewed evil. He's basically everything that I aspire to be. And if anyone deserved blessings from God, it seems like it would be Job. But one day Satan told God that Job only was faithful because God coddled him and blessed him with so much. Satan said if God were to allow him to afflict Job, Job would curse God to his face. Now, I'm sure a lot of Christians, maybe myself included, think God should be protecting us from evil. Instead, God basically said, you think so? Then go for it. So Satan buffeted poor Job like a canoe in a tempest, but no matter how bad things got, Job would not curse God. Instead, Job said one of my favorite all-time scriptures, Job 13:15, though God slay me, yet will I trust in him. There have been times in my life when things were so hard and they seemed so unfair that I couldn't help but wonder if God is a trickster. Nevertheless, I'm with Job. Though God slay me, yet will I trust in him. I am all in on the gospel of Jesus Christ. The great philosopher Walt Disney once said, when you believe a thing, believe in it all the way, implicitly and unquestionable, close quote. And that's definitely me. My Heavenly Father, my Savior Jesus Christ, and the living prophet have my complete trust. Not just because I know that this restored gospel of Jesus Christ is true, but because I know God loves me and he sees what I cannot.
Yeah, I love that answer. Oh, thank you. So I love that you were telling us that you were raised quite traditionally, and then
Yes.
you found the gospel. Tell us about your conversion story.
Okay, well, my mom was a single mother. She got pregnant in high school, and so she raised me and two younger brothers, and then she had a remarriage, and we have two younger sisters at that as well. And life was really quite hard for us. We lived in a burned out trailer that had been abandoned in this area of the forest. So for a while, we had no running water or heat or electricity. Somehow mom got electricity brought to our trailer, and I brought running water from a river that was upstream from the trailer to the trailer. And so we cut wood to heat it. But my mom struggled, and sometimes she would be away for a couple of days. And as the oldest of five, that was really scared for me. I'd worry if she was going to be coming back. And when I was 16 years old, just laying in my bed, I got really concerned. And I said this prayer, and the prayer, it's going to make people laugh, but it was really sincere for me at the time. I prayed that if there was a God, could he please levitate me from my bed? It seemed like such an easy thing for God to do, just to raise this kid. He's moved mountains, he's created worlds.
Well,
And I
but
prayed
it
in
sounds like you were basically saying, I need to know you're there.
Yes, that is exactly what I wanted to know. And I kept with it for a long time. The last time I remember seeing the clock was just after 4 a.m. And when I finally gave up, I thought to myself, well, there's no God, or if there is a God, he sure didn't care about me. And soon after, I happened upon missionaries. They were walking in the rain, and I gave them a ride. But that wasn't a positive encounter, and it didn't lead to, being taught or anything. And then one day, maybe just a week after my prayer, a girl in my friend group asked me to go to the movies with her. And the movie, this is the late 70s, was Oh God. And you're too young to probably know about it, but
No, I know that one.
oh, okay. Well, it stars John Denver as a grocery store clerk and George Burns as God.
Yeah.
And the whole situation of the movies is George Burns visits John Denver and basically makes John Denver a prophet and says, give my message of love to the world. And John Denver tries his best, but nobody believes it, and sets up a lot of humorous situations. And the movie ends with, and spoiler alert if you guys haven't seen the movie, with um, God being called to witness for John Denver, and he walks into the courtroom and they hand him a Bible, and John or George Burns puts his hand on the Bible and they say, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And George Burns says, so help me.
Yeah, yeah.
And but as we left that movie, I told my friend, this is just the most amazing thing, because there could be a prophet on the earth right now and people don't realize it. And she's a Latter-day Saint, and I don't really understand everything that means. And she's like, yeah, there could, you know. And I said, and he could be trying so hard, but people don't believe him. She's like, yeah. And so I drop her off at the house, and then she invites me to her church. And I was a Catholic altar boy. I thought I knew how churches went. And then when my mom got remarried to a Presbyterian, went to the Presbyterian church for a while. And then I played bass when I was a kid. And so I'd get asked to play in bands for other churches in town. And I'd attended lots of churches, so I thought I knew what to expect when I went to a Latter-day Saint sacrament meeting. But as I walked in, my friend whispered to me, this isn't one of our normal meetings. This is a fast meeting. And I whispered back to her, great, the faster the better. I'm starving. And seriously, that's what we did. And so we walked into this room, and it was just a small branch in Sitka, Alaska, and the building was in extremely poor shape. Everybody was wearing their coats and gloves, and you could see your breath in the meeting. And later, not long after my baptism, the building actually got condemned by the city, so we had to meet in a Seventh-day Adventist building that we rented because they weren't using it on Sunday. And so as we were sitting there, I didn't get what was happening. I had no context for it. The people seemed really poor, and so I thought, when they pass around the tray for collections, I'm going to drop a few bucks in here because these guys could really use it. And then, as a Catholic, they have these, you're given sacrament wine and these wafers that dissolve instantly when they touch your tongue.
Yeah.
And they passed around breadcrumbs, that a kid broke up, and then it was just water. And I'm like, these guys are so poor. I can't believe it. Good for them, for trying to worship. And then this guy in a business suit stood up and he started talking and he sat down. And you could feel this really awkward silence. And as a Latter-day Saint, I know now that it was a fast and testimony meeting and no one was standing. But at the time I thought, oh my goodness, the priest is late. How embarrassing. I thought the guy in the suit was just a warm-up guy, some deacon in the church, and there was a door off to the side up front, so I had my eyes glued to that door, like at any moment, this bald, portly guy in silk robes is going to come crashing through that door, all red-faced, and apologize for being late and give us a sermon. So I wanted to be the first one to notice the doorknob rolling, so I'm watching this door real carefully. And instead, this woman stood up from the back of the room. She walked to the front and she shared her testimony. And I didn't understand how I was feeling, like I was feeling. And someone else stood up, and someone else stood up, and I turned to my friend and I said, you mean you guys just stand up and tell each other how you feel about God and his interactions in your life? And she said, yeah, I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but yeah, that's what we're doing. I said, you mean you could stand up there and tell us how you feel about God? She got really nervous and she said, yeah, did you want me to? And I said, if you wouldn't mind, I'm really curious. And so she got up and shared her testimony. She came and she sat down next to me, and I told her, do you have to be a member of your church to stand up there? And she says, I don't know. I've never seen a non-member go up there before. At the time, I wasn't known as a very reverent kid. My hair was past my shoulders and everything. She looked at me kind of warily and said, well, why? And I said, well, because it's like someone's opened up my chest and took a pitcher of warm, thick liquid love and is pouring it into my heart. And like a fire, it's just pounding all through my body right now. I just want to tell you guys that there's something different about your church. There's something different that I've never felt in anyone else's church. And she said, well, I've never seen a non-member go up there before. And I thought, well, I better not make waves. And so I didn't go up. But later on, she'd gone to California with her family on vacation. And I was really curious. I'm like, was that just because I was sitting with a pretty girl? There's got to be some explanation for how I felt. And so I invited myself back to church, and the feeling was there again. And she wasn't even in, the state. And so I started studying with the missionaries that night. And when she got back, I was glad to see her. But honestly, I was way more excited to see her dad because he had the priesthood, and I understood that he could baptize me and that I could participate in the gift of the Holy Ghost and have that feeling a lot more often. And so that became my conversion story, at least how I first felt the Spirit. But I was still 17, and my mom wouldn't give me permission to be baptized. And then finally, she made a deal with me. I could be baptized, but I had to be kicked out of the house. And so I told the missionaries about that, and they shared a scripture with me that, anyone who's, left their father or mother or, family for my name's sake will be blessed 100-fold. And I took that to mean that I should go ahead and do this. So mom kicked me out, and I got a signed letter to be baptized. The branch, they rented a swimming pool. That this organization had. So, we had it for the night. After my baptism, everyone then gets in, swimsuits and takes advantage of the fact that we have a swimming pool.
Yeah.
On my mission, I learned that wasn't standard protocol, and I kind of housed myself in a building. Nobody knew I was there until graduation, and then after my graduation, left for the lower 48 and saw a traffic light. And that, I guess, kind of rounds out that story.
So, the thought just came to me as you were telling us that you really wanted to bear your testimony that first time.
Yeah.
Tom, you've just borne your testimony to everybody who is willing to listen to this. And it may be years and years and years since that happened, but you have now had that opportunity.
Thank you for that. And I've got this weird defect. Whenever I'm sitting in a testimony meeting and no one's standing, I feel very impelled to stand. I wish that wasn't the case, but I definitely do. I love testimony meetings. And, as a missionary, some very unpredictable things can happen in a testimony that if you have investigators there, you kind of wish wouldn't happen. But I love to share my testimony. Like I said, I am all in. And even though I've been very tested at times in my faith, every time, I hold fast and I have the experience that Job did. In the end, I just feel even more committed to the gospel and even more sure of the light that I'm given.
So, what if they're not too personal, what are some of the tests that you have gone through that it sounds like have actually brought you closer to the Lord after you've passed through them or as you've passed through them?
Yeah. Well, gosh, probably in the darkest time of my life, my mom was really struggling with leukemia. She was in Seattle at a hospital. She took a real hard turn for the worse. She was about to have a bone marrow transplant from my uncle. And my uncle in Seattle called me and said, Tommy, you need to get down here. I was so broke. I couldn't, I couldn't pay attention. I was so broke, and I didn't have a way to get down to be with Mom before she passed away. And I was thinking to myself, what was my last conversation with my mom? And I couldn't remember what it was about, but I was sure of what my last words were to her, because when I got off my mission, I decided that whenever I'm visiting with my family, I'd always end our visit by saying, bye, I love you. That way, if anything were to ever happen, I'd know that the last thing I said was, I love you. So I went to church very down and didn't know what to do, just thinking about my mom, wondering, when I get that call that she'd left us. And after church, this person in my ward who I did not know very well, he had this broken leg, and he came to me and he said, I've got tickets for Seattle, and I just feel the strongest impression that I need to tell you that I can't take this trip. And I'm like, okay. And I was never going to assume that he meant that he was giving them to me, and I knew I couldn't afford to buy them. So I didn't really have anything to say. And after church, I sat with our ward choir, and when I got home, there was a message on the answering machine. Oh my goodness. I can't believe you brought me to these hard stories, Andrew. But on the answering machine, he said, I just have this overpowering feeling that I need to give these tickets to you. So I've already taken the liberty of transferring them to your name. The tickets are for this early this evening. I hope you can go. If they go to waste, I understand. And I had 3 kids at the time, and there were 4 tickets that just landed in my lap to go to Seattle. So I went and was with my mom as she was passing away. And as I showed up, most of the family was there. My aunt was there. And the first thing she said to me was, Tommy, I'm glad you could make it. I think Rosie's just hanging on to see you before she goes. She had me when she was in high school. In a lot of ways, we grew up together. We were very, very close. And I went to visit my mom in her last hours in the room, and she hugged all of her grandkids to death, squeezed the life out of them. She just loves the kids. And then she asked if everyone could please leave. And so it confused everyone, including me, and she left. Everyone left, and it was just Mom and I. And she asked me to help her get to the window. And so she was all wired up. And so she had these tubes and wires, and I helped scoot her and these things over to the window so she could look out at the city lights of Seattle. And she said, Tommy, how could a God do this to me? And her life was so hard. I have skipped so much of what she went through. It was really, really hard and unfair. And I said, prayer. And then I heard myself say words I'd never thought of before. I said, no. In the coming hours, your body will stay with us and your spirit will pass on. And your Catholic training has taught you that you've gone to the world of spirits and that you're now living with good people, and that is true. But you'll also think that that's the end of your progression, and it's not. In this world of spirits, some missionaries like I once was will come visit you, and you'll probably think they're nuts. Everyone will. And they'll tell you things that I've been trying to teach you all my life. Please promise me that you'll just listen to them, that you'll listen to their message. And when the time comes, I'll do your temple work here on earth so you can be baptized. And then we can be together forever as a family. And all these unjust things that you lived through will be made right. Without the gospel of Jesus Christ, life just sucks and then you die. And it's just terrible. But with the gospel of Jesus Christ, you understand that this is one of the stages that we come through, and that God's love will make everything right and more in the end. And Mom promised that she'd do that. And, eventually I met a woman who I just adore, my British wife, and I baptized her for to be I really felt my mom's presence in the temple that day. And I feel like she's accepted the gospel and that a glorious reunion is awaiting us. And I would never have any of this knowledge if it wasn't for my testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ and these many tender mercies I've been given, even though times are dark and hard. I don't think I've ever been abandoned. And with that faith, life is just, it's joyous in the big picture. It really is.
Oh, yeah.
You did this. I didn't plan on talking about this stuff.
Oh, I think though that there are people that will hear this and feel the same, feel what needs to be felt, and have that testified to them. Shall we talk about happier things?
Oh, I'd love to. Yes, thanks. I can pivot to that.
Tell us about your mission. It sounded like you had a pretty good mission, and it was impactful for the rest of your life as well. Tell us about your mission.
Well, on my mission, I was companions with an elder named Elder Hale, which I'm trying to not confuse with your name, Hales. Elder Hale was from Australia, and we were together. We were companions for 6 months. We were also in the MTC together, so that gave us 8 months, and we were very close. We still are to this day. When he visits the United States from Australia, he's always staying at our house too. At any rate, when we were serving together, he used to tease me, Elder Pittman, I bet you can't wait until you're white and delightsome like me. And I never had a good comeback for that. He always got me. But then when the time came for him to get transferred, it was kind of hard for us because we were, as I said, very close. And so as we were waiting for the car to come pick him up to bring him to his next area, he had this idea. He said, Elder Pittman, you have no family at home. And, I did, but none that were of my faith, and no one wrote me while I was on my mission. And he said, why don't you, after your mission, move to Australia with me? You could stay with me. We could go to the Spanish branch, which we have in our stake. There are lots of pretty girls in Australia. You would like it there. I was thinking, yeah, sounds like I would. And then finally, the retort came to me. I told him, Elder Hale, I just don't know if I can leave the land choice above all other lands.
What did he say to that?
he thought it was funny, and he admitted that I got him finally. But one day when we were still together and out knocking doors, we served in Southern California, Spanish speaking. And there's no telling when you knock on a door if you'll be speaking Spanish or English or even some other language when the door opens. Not that we really spoke other languages. At any rate, the door opened, and this tall man with a collar, I was going to call him elderly, but he's probably about the age I am now. This man opened up the door, and he had this collar. He's obviously a minister from another church. And he said, aha, the boys from Utah. And he turned to me and he said, what part of Utah are you from? And I said, Sitka. And he said, well, where's that? And I said, well, it's pretty far north. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, it's in Alaska. He's like, oh, okay. And then he turns to my companion and says, and what part of Utah are you from? And he said, Sydney. And because it's just one word, the guy couldn't pick up his accent. And he said, is that in the north too? And he says, no, it's south. It's in Australia. And we had a chance to visit with him and kind of let him know that this is kind of a global church. It's not just this Utah group anymore, and probably hadn't been for a long time. But another time when we were out knocking doors, this woman opened up the door and we gave our approach, and she said, thank you, but I'm Catholic. And she started to shut the door, like has happened on us thousands of times. But for some reason, I blurted, wait, in Spanish. And she stopped, and my companion looked at me like, Pittman, what are you doing? I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. I just blurted, wait. And then I said, I want to show you something. And that was to stall for time. I'm praying internally, Heavenly Father, what do I do with this? And so I started flipping through our flip chart. We used to carry these big black binders that had pictures that we used to help us teach. And then when I came across a picture of a painting of Christ in America, I thought, oh, wow, this is it. And so I opened up my flip chart and I showed her that picture and I said, who is this? And she leaned in to look and she said, well, that looks like Jesus Christ. I said, yes. And who are these people? And she looked and she said, are they Native Americans? And I said, yes. You told us that you're a Catholic, but have you ever wondered what your people used to believe before the Spanish conquistadores forced your ancestors to be Catholics. And you could see the look on her face, like she actually hadn't thought about that before. And I told her, I am a Native American, and we are here to teach you what your ancestors believed before Columbus. And that was an effective door approach, we found. But that question stayed with me for a long time, especially as I was working in these organizations that I used to work for, the Native Hospital, our tribal offices. I would wonder if everybody really had a grasp of what we used to believe before Columbus. And I worry that sometimes, well, maybe in large part, we're losing the connection to our true tribal identity. For example, among the Tlingits, we like to talk about how we had code talkers in World War II, like the Navajos and other tribes had. And we like to talk about what a powerful people we once were. There's archaeological evidence that Tlingits used canoes to go from Alaska as far as Hawaii and to Mexico and back to trade. And when the Russians owned Alaska, no tribe came close to battling them as fiercely as the Tlingits did, our tribe did. In fact, we like to joke that the real reason Alaska wanted to, or we like to joke that the real reason Russia wanted to sell Alaska to the United States is because they just didn't want to mess with us anymore. But while we're very proud of these aspects of our culture, there are other things that we're either not so proud of or we are unaware of. For example, everyone knows that our tribe is one of the totem pole tribes of the Pacific Northwest. But what's not as well known is that some of our tribes have a person carved in them wearing a black stovetop hat. Any guesses as to who this could be?
Well, the most famous one that we all talk about is Lincoln, right?
Exactly right. I have a
but
friend
how does
go ahead.
Lincoln get in your totem pole?
Good question, and I happen to have a good answer too. I have a friend whose mother has a PhD from Harvard in anthropology, and she's very influential in the tribe. She's confirmed that that totem pole was carved with the help of a photograph of Abraham Lincoln. Some Tlingits claim that Lincoln was on the totem pole because the Emancipation Proclamation, and slaves who were emancipated wanted to honor him. Others say that that doesn't make sense because they couldn't afford to have a totem pole erected. It was erected by richer Tlingits who were complaining about their slaves being emancipated. This anthropologist says neither of those are true. But one thing we know is absolutely true is that at the time of the Emancipation Proclamation, about 1/3 of my tribe were slaves. So I'm probably a descendant of slaves or slave owners. In fact, Tlingits are on record in the state of Alaska going to court in 1886, claiming that tribal sovereignty gave them the right to continue to own slaves, and they lost that. This is a really negative part of our culture, of course, and a part of the culture that a lot of people vigorously deny is true. But I think we need to acknowledge truths, even when we don't want them to be true. For example, I have a personal strong dislike for referring to Indigenous Americans as Indians. I'm not offended by it or anything. I get it. But I think it's kind of like when Latter-day Saints are referred to as Mormons. It's just misleading, and it obfuscates what our true identity is as Christians. But to me, calling Native Americans Indians is demeaning to both Native Americans and actual Indians from India. It's basically saying, we don't care about your race, we don't care about your culture, all you brown people are the same to me. And so I really don't like it. We've never been Indians. In Alaska, all of us love fry bread. I don't know anyone who doesn't, and we often have fry bread at a lot of our Native American gatherings. And we feel really very Indian when we eat it, and we think we're identifying with our culture, but the thing is, that's not our culture. Tlingits never grew wheat, and we never ground flour. It wasn't part of our heritage. In fact, most Native Americans, when I went to BYU in the lower 48, as I associated with them, I'm talking too fast again. I'm going to give your machine a problem, I'm sure.
You're totally fine.
Okay. Most Native Americans identify with fry bread as a Native American thing, and we feel very unified, but I do see it differently. Fry bread is not exactly pre-Columbian. Indian fry bread was invented in 1864. Navajos were forced to relocate 300 miles to a land where they couldn't easily grow their traditional staples of vegetables and beans. So they started to starve. To save them, the US government gave them lard, white flour, processed sugar, and canned goods. And from government handouts, Navajos invented Navajo fry bread. So to me, fry bread is not a symbol of our Native American culture. It is a symbol of how colonial oppression tried to erase our Native American culture, what we believed and what we ate before they came. Um, uh, yeah, that's probably, well, I'm happy to eat fry bread. I love it. I just hope that we all recognize that that's not actually Native culture. Um, that is our adaptation to culture after colonization.
Yeah. So, did you, what other benefits did you get from your mission? What other things have impacted your life because of your mission?
Oh boy, you don't want to get me on mission stories. Your machine's going to run out of space again very, very quickly. I love my mission. One of the reasons is because it felt I was baptized and everybody was very, very nice to me, very welcoming, but it's such a family-oriented church. I never actually felt like I belonged until my mission. People accepted me. I tried to learn the language very well so that they all thought I was Hispanic, and I had this instant acceptance as a missionary, and I really loved that part of it. I got very, very close with some of the people. As Elder Hales pointed out, I didn't have anything to go home to really, and so for a long time on my mission, I considered just ending my mission and staying in Southern California. Going to school there. California had great school benefits if you wanted to use them. For being an in-state resident with 2 years there, I could do it. Let me say this. When I was growing up in the 6th grade, I got very, very ill, and I actually missed months of school. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And when I came back to school, the teachers introduced me as the new kid.
You're kidding me.
Not at all. And I had gone to school with these kids since 1st grade. I was in my 6th year of being with them, and nobody knew me. I was such a quiet kid, and I was just fine with that, with nobody noticing me at all. I was such an introvert. My mission definitely helped me change that, where I could instigate conversations, but I think it helped me be empathetic with people too, where I could notice things about them and listen to them and look for opportunities to kind of lift them or serve them. My mission changed me in very, very big and massive ways. It gave me confidence to be with people.
Wow, I love that. Yeah. Um, do you want to talk about how you found some siblings again, or should we not? Because I actually found that really interesting yesterday. So,
yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, so the question yesterday and now is, you are Tom Pittman the 6th, right? But you said that
Tom the 7th. That's
okay,
a lot of numbers to keep track of.
You're Tom Pittman the 7th, but you
Uh-huh.
said that you were raised by a single mother. So
Yes.
how do you have any relationship with your dad? And yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I grew up with my mom, and I didn't have much contact with my dad when I was very young. And he, had other children and other families, and I had the family that I grew up with my mom in Sitka. But thanks to the, great and spacious internet, I am very close with the family, and we've been able to find each other through the years. But one one thing in particular, one day I'd returned from a business trip to Europe and was in the Anchorage airport walking down to baggage claim. And as I was walking to baggage claim, someone was walking away from baggage claim, and we were walking toward each other. Our eyes just locked, and we walked toward each other, and we walked slower. And then we stopped about 10 feet from each other, just staring at each other. And he said, "You have to be Tom Pittman." I said, "Yes. Who are you?" And he said, "I am Ian. I'm your younger brother." And it was the first time that we met. And the reason we were looking at each other is because we knew we looked a lot alike. He was my half brother from another mother, if you want to, use the cliche. And we were able to, know each other from that. But yeah, I have siblings that I didn't grow up with who I'm very glad to get to know more fully. My my dad is, well, he's now a retired commercial fisherman, and he says that he used to be teased on his mission for being the intellectual fisherman. He was always reading and having these conversations that not everybody were into,
Yeah.
but it was definitely his thing. And to learn how much I'm like him has been real fun.
Cool.
Not just his name, but some other things as well.
Yeah. So tell us about your career path too, because that I find that so interesting that you say you grew up in this situation and yet you've been quite successful as a professional in your life. So how did that happen?
Well, thank you for saying so, but almost all of it was by accident. Right people around me, right place at the right time. I think it probably started with my great grandmother. My great grandmother, who is Scottish on my father's side, when I was leaving for school, I was so intimidated. I was really intimidated. My mom, didn't graduate high school. I'm the first one in my family to graduate high school and then was looking at going to college. I used to read books on how to succeed in college, and I was really scared that I couldn't. And so when I went to visit my family to say goodbye because I was going down to BYU, I was with my great grandmother, who was 101 at the time. She lived to be 107, and I was with her actually when she passed away. And I was telling her I was going down to school, and she said, "Tommy, are you going to study computers?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to study marketing. My career goal at the time was to be a marketing representative for IBM." And I told her I was going to take computer classes because I thought it would help me with my career. And she said, "Tommy, I really think you should study computers." And I'm thinking, she's 101. I'll just say whatever and keep visiting with her. And she could tell that I was kind of brushing her off. She's very sharp. And so she grabbed both of my hands in her little hands. And we're sitting together on a small couch. And she looked into my eyes. She had my full attention. And she said, "Tommy, when I was a young woman back in the 1800s," and my mind started whirling like, in the 1800s, I'm calibrating for what my impression was of that era. She said, "No one thought cars would become the thing that they are today." And I thought about that. George Washington went to his place of business in pretty much the same getup that Julius Caesar did 2,000 years before. So why would anyone think that, the world would change so much, transportation, the infrastructure, because of automobiles? And she said, "In my time, it wasn't considered ladylike to learn to drive, but my boyfriend had a car and I wanted to learn to drive, so I did." And I thought I could see that, in her. And she said, "But none of my friends did. And over time, as transportation infrastructure grew the way that it did, and automobiles became so dominant in our culture, my friends still didn't learn to drive. And then eventually we all became widows." And she said that after she and all her friends became widows, she used to drive around and pick them all up and take them shopping and to their doctor's appointments and things like that. And she said, "Tommy, they were really hurt because they never learned to drive." And then she leaned into me and said, "Tommy, I think that computers are the cars of your generation. And if you don't learn to drive them, you'll be hurt too." And she just blew me away with that. I was like, wow, okay, I'll study computers. And so I changed my major from marketing to information management at BYU and study computers. And it's been such a blessing, especially I think to be a Native American in this field, because it just gave me opportunities I never would have had. I went to work, after working for IBM and the University of Alaska and the city of Anchorage and places like that, the state of Alaska. I went to work for our tribal government, their offices. And at the time, every aspect of the tribal government was its own office that was funded by different grants. So although, employment services, all the aspects that make up a tribal government were housed in this same large 3-story building, they didn't communicate to each other. So I came in as the chief technology officer and created a network where everyone could come together, put them on the same email system, the same, timesheet system and everything. I really felt like I played a major role in unifying our tribe that way. It was really meaningful for me. I just really loved working in that job. Also, I went to work for the Native Hospital in Anchorage, and the timing was really good. In Europe and the Scandinavian countries, they had been pioneering what's called telemedicine, and specifically teleradiology, where they use wide area networks to bring in data, especially imaging data from outlying areas. And so we learned what they had done and educated ourselves up really well. And I was part of a group that launched telemedicine and teleradiology in Alaska. So in all these villages in Alaska, people who were trained to operate, not an MRI, because that's pretty complicated and very expensive, but, X-ray machines and ultrasounds and things like that, people could come in, and then people who were trained to operate the machines could do it. And then their data would come to Anchorage over the network that we built out. And back then, technology was a bit different. We didn't have the smartphones we did. And there were a lot of blackout areas, especially in Alaska. So I remember sitting in sacrament meeting. I used to have to wear two pagers, one for each network to cover the blackout spots, and two cell phones as well. And then I had my personal cell phone so the kids could get in touch with me. I looked like, a Batman utility belt everywhere I went. Definitely very geeky and nerdy in that way. But as I was sitting in sacrament meeting, one of my pagers went off, and I knew I had to get into Anchorage to fix the network. And as I fixed it, the first study, they call them studies as they come in, the imaging files that came in was of my uncle. And I was like, wow, he's been hurt where he is. And I'm so glad that we have this technology so that radiologists and doctors in Anchorage can work with people out in the village to know what's good. And so, I've had a really fun career. It was timing and it wasn't planned, but I really enjoyed what I do. And it matches well with me. I probably tend to lean toward logic anyway, and I love to learn. I mean, if you leave me alone in a room with nothing to do, I'm going to figure something that I didn't know before, and it's always changing. And I love change too, because change is an opportunity for improvement and things can get better.
Yeah, I think that's so exciting that you've been able to do that. I wonder how it's gone forward since then. And I bet, it had to start somewhere. It had to have that start. So I love that you had that opportunity.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so I have one final question for you.
Okay.
What does it mean to you to know that you belong to the tribe of Israel?
As all your other guests always say, I love that question. I believe I belong to the tribe of Israel by heritage, but also by covenant, and they're both meaningful for me. In Genesis chapter 17, God told Abraham that he would make him a father of many nations, which is a crazy promise when you think about it. God's making this promise to a 100-year-old guy who only has one child. How on earth is he going to become a father of many nations, right? And then the very next chapter, God told Abraham, quote, all the nations of the earth will be blessed in him, close quote. All nations. I mean, that's just amazing that could get written down and that it was done. And obviously it didn't mean that all nations would be 100% literal descendants of Abraham. That's not how it's played out at all. It meant that Israel would eventually be scattered among all nations. But I also think that it refers to the Bible. The Bible was written by descendants of Abraham, and preserved for thousands of years as a testament of Christ. And the Bible has also been a blessing to all the nations of the earth. Giving that the scattering of Israel and the scriptures are how God kept his covenant to Israel and to his grandfather Abraham in the old world, it makes sense to me that God would do the same thing to keep his covenant with Abraham in the new world as well, in the Book of Mormon lands. We learn from the Book of Mormon that God led the families of Ishmael, Lehi, and Zoram to the promised land somewhere in America. However, it never says anything in the Book of Mormon that these were the only nations that populated the Americas, the only tribes that did. I think it very well could be that just as Israel was not the only nation in Western Asia, the Lehites were not the only indigenous people in the Americas. And just as Israel was scattered through the nations of the old world, the families of Ishmael and Lehi and Zoram were scattered throughout the nations of the New World as well. The Book of Mormon says from time to time that groups left the main bodies and spread to the north and to the south and to the isles of the sea. And I think in this way, Lehi's children have blessed the American peoples of the earth. And moreover, and probably more importantly, the scriptures, the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, has been blessing the people of the earth. And, you know, we Lamanites or Lehites or indigenous Americans as well. In the Sermon on the Mount on the Bible, Jesus says that we are to be the salt of the earth. And I think it's interesting that the very same scripture is found in 3 Nephi 12. When Jesus comes to the Americas, he told them as well that we're the salt of the earth. We're the salt of the earth, God's covenant people, not the meat and potatoes. We're meant to bring savor to the many peoples of the world and be God's instruments in bringing in the gospel. So I don't think any of us should feel, badly about being a hybrid. I think we hybrids are how God is one of the ways that God's keeping his promise to Abraham.
Yeah.
And with that as context, again, I say that I believe I'm of the tribe of Israel by heritage and maybe by lineage, and that means a lot to me. But I'm also part of the tribe of Israel by covenant, and that means everything to me. To paraphrase the Norse god Loki, I am Tom of Alaska, and I am burdened with glorious purpose.
That's so cool. I agree with you all the way, yeah. Thank you for your time, Tom. This has been delightful and uplifting. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you again. I've said this offline for everything that you're doing to gather Israel through these podcasts. I feel very close to Native peoples every time I go out on a walk and listen to another episode. I am so much enjoying what you're doing. You're a very big blessing to our people.
My brother is still in the hospital with lung problems due to the coronavirus. There's nothing that I can do. There's nothing I can do except for pray. And anyway, I was texting with some family members and saying how much I hate that there's nothing I can do. And the thought, I've for a long time thought how much prayer is a blessing. But I realized that the thing that, however this turns out, the thing that most of us are doing better right now in my family is turning our hearts to the Lord. Because it's all in His hands right now. So it's kind of been something I've been thinking about ever since I had those words come to me. That it's turning my heart to the Lord. And I wonder how many times we don't recognize that even when we're having other trials and tribulations. How it is softening our hearts. And that's found in the Book of Mormon again and again. But I think in the moment sometimes it's hard to recognize it. I think of the people of Limhi who were just being enslaved, treated very badly by the Lamanites, and they turned their hearts to the Lord. I think of King Lamoni's wife who didn't believe other people that her husband was dead. She turned her heart to the Lord. I think of Joseph Smith in Carthage jail, and it felt like he wasn't being heard. And he turned his heart to the Lord and was like, "Why aren't you listening to me?" And the Lord gave him the revelation that said all these trials are for his good. So yeah, I've been thinking about those things. Thinking about how I I'm grateful for the family that I have. I'm also grateful for all the people who have been checking on my state of being. Even though I'm removed from the situation physically, I care, and they care how I feel. I'm so grateful for them. I hope that you have people that you are watching out for and people who are watching out for you. And I hope that you are turning your heart to the Lord. And I hope you have a super wonderful, awesome day. Tribe of Testimonies is not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The music is a traditional hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, arranged and performed by Kyle Forsyth. If you know someone who might be interested in being a guest, please reach out to me at tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com.